Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by returning guest of the podcast, Chloë Ashby, to discuss her latest novel, Family Friends, a novel that is perfect for fans of The Paper Palace and Tessa Hadley, and I loved it so much. Family Friends is out now, and you can grab yourselves a copy via the link in the show notes or from your favourite bookshop. Author of Family Friends, Chloë Ashby is an author and award-winning arts critic. Since graduating from the Coutald Institute of Art, she has written for publications such as The Times, TLS, Guardian, FT Life and Arts, Spectator and Frieze. She has interviewed artists Judy Chicago and Damien Hirst and novelist Sheila Heti and Jeanette Winterson, among others. Chloë is the author of 2 non-fiction books on art history, Look at This If You Love Great Art, which was published in 2021, and Colours of Art, The Story of Art in 80 Palettes, which was a Times Best Book of 2022. Her novels include Wet Paint, published in 2022, and Second Self, which was published in 2023, and is what we had Chloë on the podcast for back in 2023. Her latest novel, Family Friends, is a deeply atmospheric and compelling novel about what happens when the ties of love and loyalty are stretched to breaking point, and I'm delighted to have Chloë back here with me to discuss it. Welcome back, Chloë, to A Pair of Bookends.
Hello, thank you. It is so nice to be back.
It's so nice to have you. We were just saying that it feels like no time has passed at all, and yet so much time has passed.
I know, it really does. It's such a treat to be talking to you again. And it does feel as if we were talking yesterday. It was, what, 3 years ago now.
Yeah,
So
honestly, it's
we're overdue
crazy.
a catch up.
We
We'll,
are.
we'll
We
try.
absolutely are.
We'll try not to just catch up on we'll try
We'll
to
try.
vaguely
We'll
talk about the
try.
book.
But before we dive into your writing process and your new book, I do, of course, like to start by asking what you're currently reading. So could you tell us what you've been enjoying recently?
Yes, so I actually read the last few pages of this book last night. I have been loving it so much. It's called The Hero of This Book. It's by Elizabeth McCracken. I
I
don't know if you've read it, have
I
you?
feel like I've got that on my shelf, but I haven't read it yet.
Oh, if you've got it on your shelf, bump it right up. It
Okay.
is
It's quite a
so,
slim book, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a slim book that you can get through, so speedily if you want. And yet I also found myself really lingering over the
Savory.
pages. I have so many pages, the corners folded over where I wanted to remember phrases or sentences. But it's not quite a novel, it's not quite a memoir. It's about this young woman who's recently bereaved. Her mother died, and it follows her throughout this day in London as she sort of wanders around. And it's just so witty and clever and kind of surprising and at the same time simple. It's all the things. It's just, I really, really would recommend it. I found it very refreshing.
That sounds great. I need to absolutely bump that up my TBR.
Yeah,
I
definitely
am
do.
trying to get a selection together of when I have a break from the podcast in a couple of months, and I'm getting a selection of books together that I'm going to read during that time. So I think that needs to be one of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it was it's sometimes nice, isn't it? It's so easy to get sucked into just reading new books the whole
Yeah,
time, and
yeah,
especially for you if you're constantly interviewing people. So
yeah.
this one came out a few years ago, I forget exactly when, but I'm now really eager to kind of burrow into her backlist as well. She's written lots of short story collections and other novels and things.
I also saw she's written something recently. I went into a bookshop and there was like something on writing. It was like a
Oh
green
yes,
cover.
yes,
I think I don't know if that's
exactly.
fairly new. But
I
that looks great, and I
Yeah.
was really sad because there was only one copy, and I watched somebody pick it up and take it to the
No.
till.
Oh, yes, I've gone completely blank on on the name, but exactly, it's a kind of, I guess, like a kind of craft book,
Yes, yeah,
how to write fiction, but I think very much in her own way. I don't
yeah.
think it's like a typical how to write fiction book. I don't know.
No, no. We will remember what that is, and I'll pop it in the show notes for
Yes,
listeners, so we're not being
yeah,
annoying.
yes.
But let's get
It's a
into.
green book.
It's a green, yeah, really helpful, Han. But let's get into your new book. I would love to start by asking. So I'm very drawn in by book covers, and
Mm.
it's not great. It makes me sound very shallow, but I will see a book cover and go, I want to read that, and or I will be drawn towards it. I'll read the blurb and I'll know if it's for me or if it's not. And all of your covers, all of your novels, they all have the most amazing covers, and I was immediately drawn in. And I wondered, because authors aren't always hugely involved with covers, but I wondered with your art background, how much involvement you get to have, if any.
Mm. First of all, I think it's so normal to be drawn to a book by the cover or equally repelled by a
I'm
book.
glad you say this.
Very normal. I love this cover. I think this is my favorite of all my book covers. And I mean, it's all thanks to Charlotte, this brilliant designer at Penguin, who did wonderful things with a painting that I feel so lucky to have on the cover, which is by Caroline Walker. She's an artist, a Scottish artist, and I've interviewed her a couple of times and I've written about her work quite a bit. So when we were sort of having early conversations about the cover, I was very keen with this book to have an artwork on the cover. I've loved my previous covers. Both of them had photographs, and I've always wanted a painting. And so when I was chatting with my editor, Ella, early on about this book, I sort of sent over, at her request, I didn't just do it uninvited, but sent over a bunch of paintings. And this was one of them. As soon as I saw this painting, it really made me think of Izzy, one of the characters in the book, who I'm sure we'll talk about more. But it was funny because initially, the other paintings I sent were all kind of group portraits. And initially I thought, well, I guess it makes sense that we have a group portrait on the cover. It's a book about a group of friends. And then discussions were kind of had, and it became clear that actually the title, Family Friends, it's about a group, and how it's sort of more intriguing and mysterious in a way to have a single solitary figure.
I agree. Yeah, it is such a gorgeous cover, and the colours as well are
Yeah.
gorgeous. No, I love that, and I think we should start by you setting up the premise of Family Friends for the
Mm.
listeners.
Yeah, so Family Friends is about a group of friends, two couples who met at university and now in their 40s and are in this stage of life where the small differences that have always existed between them are becoming a little bit more stark. Every year they go away together to this big crumbly house in the south of France that belongs to one of their parents. And it's this kind of, cherished ritual, an annual ritual that they look forward to. But this year, they all have various things going on in the background, and there is also a new guest upsetting the balance of the holiday. So it's a book about friendship and marriage, parenthood, money, desire, all those sorts of
All the
things.
good stuff.
All the good stuff.
All the stuff that is ripe for drama. We love.
Yes, basically, it is. I mean, it is essentially a family drama.
Yes, which I love. I absolutely love.
Yeah.
And I do think you put a group of people in a confined space and anything could happen. I think if you put people at a dinner table, if you put people
Hmm.
on holiday together, living in a house together, there's so much that can happen in that small
Yeah.
space.
And especially with this holiday, because there's a heat wave, they are literally being pressed into the house. I mean, we all know how this feels right now
Oh, we
with the
do.
heat wave
So it's the
in London.
perfect book for this summer that we're
Well, yeah,
having.
exactly. I know. I hope people aren't wanting to escape the heat wave. Hopefully, just, lean into it. We
Lean
can't get
into
away
it.
from
No,
it.
we can't. So lean into this.
So.
No, I do think we have said that we're going to be spoiler free. I do try and keep the podcast spoiler free, but we have said that it is quite difficult with this book. We're going to
Mm.
tread as carefully as we can. Let's see where we go. So I wondered, in terms of the premise of, these two married couples, four friends, they go on this annual holiday to France together. Where did that initial sort of premise come from? And was there sort of one voice that stuck out to you when you first started this book?
Yeah, so I wrote the book when I was first trying to get pregnant and then when I was pregnant. And so I suppose quite naturally I was thinking a lot about family life, what family life might look like for us, and also how my own kind of family life had been growing up.
Yeah.
And one thing that we used to do a lot when I was quite a small child was go on these big, quite chaotic group holidays with my parents' friends and their kids. And I just remember I have so many memories, for example, of like the couple who always argued, but most of all, remembering the fact that we as kids would be really left to our own devices because we were on holiday. And so we would end up kind of seeing and hearing things we shouldn't or doing things we shouldn't. So that was on my mind. And then I mentioned earlier that the two couples are kind of at the stage of life where the small differences between them are becoming a bit more stark. And I think I was noticing that just amongst my own friendship group
Hmm.
as people moved house, whether or not they were lucky enough to buy a house or a flat, settling down, getting married, having kids. You know, when you're at university and you're all kind of living in shared accommodation, you're all on a very level playing field. And
Yeah.
even if there are differences between you, you don't really notice them. And then suddenly, fast forward a few years, and for example, you walk into someone's house and you think, oh wow, wow, this is where you live. This is nice. So I was thinking about things like that. In terms of the voices, so there are 5 points of view in this book, and it's hard to remember now which voice came to me first. I think I started writing Maggie first, so one member of the two couples. And then, I mean, the chapters kind of alternate between them, not in any set order. So it sort of, yeah, flips between them in various ways. But all of the voices came quite naturally to me once I started writing. I went through a stage of, over planning, overthinking, worrying. And then as soon as I started writing, that's when kind of the book really kind of came alive.
So do you not usually plan a lot when you're writing?
It sounds silly because I am now 3 books in, but I think I'm still sort of figuring it out.
Yeah.
With Wet Paint, I didn't plan at all, and I didn't even really know I was writing a novel to begin with. And it was sort of written in this very bitty stop-start way. I was working full time in one office job at the time, and so I just sort of write it in fits and starts on the way to work and lunch breaks. I didn't plan. As a result, there was like quite a lot of structural overhaul editing that needed to happen later. With Second Self, I did plan a little more, and with Family Friends, I found that I had to plan it to an extent because
Hmm.
of the way that it jumps around between the characters, but. I think for me, I do get to a point where I just need to write
Yeah.
because if I spend too long plotting it out, I just get too much in my head about the whole thing, and it's better to just like trust my instincts. And I also don't like writing to a specific fixed end point. I prefer to
Mm.
at least feel as if I'm figuring things out on the way along with the characters.
And
So
that's like a
I
nice
yeah.
free creative process, isn't it? To just allow yourself
Yeah.
that freedom to see what comes out on the page.
Exactly. I think so. And I think yeah, I mean there are writers who do the opposite and know exactly every beat of the book and they do it brilliantly. But for me, I definitely need a bit of unknowability in there. I
Yeah.
did know from the start that this book was going to end with this big explosive dinner scene. So that I knew, and it was kind of a way of working my way towards that. But what I didn't know was what the after effects of that dinner would be.
Was there a reason that you specifically wanted a dinner scene?
I just, I love a dramatic scene over a meal,
Yeah.
whatever meal that may be. And it felt, when I was thinking about the book and the characters, it felt like, things had to come to a head at some point. And, it having that at the dining room table, where often we're all a bit polite, aren't we? I mean, I
Yeah.
think of that really fantastic scene in was it the second series of Fleabag when they're all having a terrible time and then the
Yeah.
waitress comes over and they're like, yes, lovely, lovely, which is so something that I would do.
Me too.
uh, but yeah, it just felt, I don't know, it felt like a really kind of ripe scene for exploration.
Yes, I agree. I think the way that you've written that scene is just, you can barely breathe while you're reading it because you're like, what is going to happen? Well, who's going to say what
Yeah.
next? Like, it's just like you're waiting for these little bombs to go off.
Yeah, and also I think because a lot of the book, the characters are kind of, they're together, but they're also doing their own thing, or especially the kids. The
Yes.
kids are slightly on the periphery in the beginning, and then by the end, they are really center stage, and everything kind of flips. So, yeah.
Agreed. And I do think you can really sense that parenting was something that you were interested in when you were writing this book, because we see how differently different people parent. I don't know if that makes sense as a sentence, but
Mm.
we're running with it. And I find it really interesting. We have Maggie, who, she's often throughout the novel observing Will's ability to make the children laugh, but then you see some of his decisions are quite selfish. We have Maggie, who is a deputy head teacher, I think.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
at her son's school. So, there are things that she might be missing without realizing, but, we think that she is a wonderful parent, and she is, but, as I said, there might be things she's missing. And we have Lydia,
Mm.
who is navigating being a step parent, which is obviously a whole other thing, especially in the aftermath of her stepdaughter losing her own mother. And then we have Lydia's partner, Roland, who is carrying a lot of shame around how he dealt with being a father to his daughter and the sort of little presence that he had in her childhood. I'd love it if you could tell us a bit about exploring the different dynamics in this book between parent and
Mm.
child. Do you think any one of them could be considered the perfect parent?
I don't think there's such a thing
I
in
don't know.
life
I don't.
as or maybe that's what I tell myself when I'm making mistakes in my own parenting.
I don't think
No,
there is
I
a
don't.
perfect parent.
I don't think there's such a thing. And really, I mean, it is one thing sort of at the heart of this book, this idea that we're all just muddling through.
Yes.
And all of these characters as parents and as people and husbands, wives, friends, they for the most part they are doing their best
Hmm.
and making some terrible mistakes along the way. And something that was kind of on my mind from the start was like, at what point does doing a bad thing make you a bad person? I'm not sure any of these characters are bad people. I
No.
mean, some readers may feel differently. It was something I was thinking about a lot. But in terms of, yeah, there are lots of different kind of versions of parenting at play. And I guess, I mean, my own family, my parents got divorced when I was quite young. I
Mhm.
have this wonderful stepfather who's been in my life since I was 8, I think 8. He has step brothers. He has a step parents. There's so our family kind of at large is so tangled in a way that I actually think is kind of lovely and brings in so many different influences and voices. But I think one of the relationships that I was most interested in, or two, so Roland and Izzy. So he's Izzy's father. Izzy is this beautiful, kind of rebellious 19-year-old. She's the one who the woman in the painting reminds me of. And the two couples met at university. Will, Maggie, and Lydia were studying together, and Roland was a professor. And he and Lydia had an affair, and he left his then wife and his daughter Izzy, who at the time was a toddler, to be with Lydia. And so he's kind of playing catch up in a way. And there's this huge distance between him and Izzy at the beginning of the book, and sort of slowly, as the kind of story goes on, they start to kind of creep a little bit closer. But that was one relationship I was really interested in, and also thinking about him grieving the loss of his ex-wife, and how is that? I mean, is
Yeah.
that appropriate? Is that normal? So many different things kind of spun off from that
Hmm.
particular relationship. And then with Lydia, I think she does, for the most part, quite a good job of kind of walking the line of trying to be involved in Izzy's life without overstepping the mark, being her stepmom. But the relationship, for obvious reasons, is very fraught.
Yeah, I think Izzy is such an interesting character because she's obviously navigating her own grief, but she isn't like I don't know, I think we see a lot of stepchildren portrayed in culture as like brats, and she's not a spoiled brat,
No.
she is going through it. She's quite reserved. She is maybe wary and watchful of, she's sort of getting to know this dynamic. She obviously knows them, but like not to the extent where she's like living with them. So she's sort of, observing them quite closely. And I found it really interesting because she's obviously been through a lot. So she could I wouldn't have felt like she was a bad person if she did explode. You know, she's lost her mum, but also when she was living with her mum was struggling with her mental health, would we say?
Yeah.
And you know, Izzy thinks at one point that if Izzy hadn't have been up for cooking and stuff, they wouldn't have eaten at home. You know, so it was very much that her mum was quite emotionally distant with her, whereas her
Mhm.
dad's physically distant from her. I wondered how you feel that kind of upbringing has affected Izzy.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, well, it's also just to say one thing that I think means Roland is so racked with guilt
Yeah.
because he left her. I think, at the time after Izzy was born, doctor sort of said, "Oh, it's postnatal depression. Oh, she'll pick back up over time." But Izzy's mum kind of continued to have, I forget what they refer to them as. They sort of have a kind of kiddie way of describing the depression, but like down days essentially. And then those down days kind of became more, there were more and more of them.
Yeah.
But I think she is someone, and this is sort of clear from the start, who, yeah, doesn't let her guard down very easily,
Hmm.
who is very wary of others, and yet who has this really quite soft and sweet, actually, side to her, which comes out in her relationship and friendship with Sammy, this unexpected friendship. Sammy is the 15-year-old son of Maggie and Will, and he's in quite a vulnerable place too when we meet him in the book. He's not having a good time at school. We don't know why. Maggie's tried to figure it out. As you said, she's a deputy head at the school. She's tried to ask questions and she can't, she isn't getting anywhere. But he's basically clammed up. And these two kids, if we can call them kids, like I said, he's 15, she's 19. She's sort of not a kid, but she's definitely not an adult. They kind of become this little island of support for one another. And yeah, I mean, it was sort of, I think that was one of my favorite parts of the book, was writing that friendship, relationship, kind of a coming of age type story within the wider story that goes on.
As in Izzy.
Yes, yeah,
Yes, yeah.
exactly.
No,
Yeah.
I did really enjoy the reading the friendship that sort of develops between her and Sammy. I think obviously they're each dealing with their own struggles, and
Mm,
they really needed that over the summer. Trying so hard to be
yes,
careful.
I
Um,
know.
and now I want to get into, and this is going to be a test of being spoiler free. So these families, we have Will and Maggie, who are the
Yeah,
married couple. Their children are Sammy and I've forgotten her name.
Sammy and Alice.
Alice, that's it.
Yeah,
And then we have Lydia and Roland. They have B is their daughter, and then
yeah,
Izzy is Roland's daughter, Lydia's stepdaughter. Will is harboring a few secrets and lies. Maggie is described as somebody that wants everyone and everything to be well. You know, she moves
yeah.
things along, she keeps things moving.
She
We
really
have
does.
Roland who hides away writing, and we have Lydia who sort of brushes things off and is kind of avoidant in terms of addressing
Mm.
how she feels. She doesn't look too closely at her own feelings. And I wondered how you feel in terms of like their inability to be wholly honest with each other. I don't think it's through a lack of love for each other, is it?
No, no, it's not, because I mean, within the couples, I think there's a lot of love, and definitely within the friendship group as a whole. But they all have so much going on, and I think they're also at this stage of life where they have children, but those children are no longer tiny anymore.
Hmm.
And so for the first time in quite a while, they're able to, I guess, reflect on like what they actually want, and where they are in life, and maybe where they are in life doesn't look quite as shiny and appealing as they thought it might have done
Hmm.
10, 20 years earlier. But no, you're right, they are avoidant. And I guess that's kind of where the kids come in, because the kids, like I said, are sort of off doing their own thing in the beginning, but by the end, they're really the ones who hold a mirror up to the adults and encourage them to, or force them to confront these quite uncomfortable truths
Yes.
that they're sort of unwilling to confront themselves. And I
Yes.
liked giving the children that power. I think I've always really been drawn to like child disruptors in fiction. You know, kids who really like change things in terms of the plot. So that like a very obvious example would be Bryony Tallis in Atonement, for example.
Yes.
I've always really enjoyed that, and yeah, I think that was probably the love of those sort of child disruptors who I've read about definitely fed into the book.
Children see a lot. And I
They
don't
do see
think
a
they're
lot.
given credit for, how observant they actually are.
Yeah, yeah. And especially like I mean, as we were talking about at the beginning when I was talking about my own memories of these big group holidays, when you are on holiday, you have so much more freedom. I
Mhm.
mean, also as an adult, there's a sense that you can be someone different on a holiday, or maybe you wear things that you wouldn't wear at home, like
This
little
is true.
things like that. And that's exciting, but it's also dangerous, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's not exciting when your parents are the ones fighting, but it is
No.
exciting and intriguing when you see things happening with other people's
Yeah,
parents. But it's not
yeah.
as funny when it's your own.
No, it's definitely not as funny when it's your own. I think also just glimpsing, like you said earlier about, how they all parent quite differently, but glimpsing just people who do things very differently to your parent, or behave differently
Yeah.
in good or bad ways.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating when you're a child and you see that. We've mentioned a couple of times sort of power, and I do
Mm,
want to ask about the power dynamics in the book because there is, of course, the fact that they're staying in this holiday home, which is owned by Lydia and her family. That
mm,
Maggie and Will come to stay out with their family every year. They stay there for free, so there's that sort of financial power
mm,
imbalance, I guess. We have Lydia and Roland's relationship began, as you said, it was a teacher-student relationship. Will and Lydia knew each other before Maggie sort of came into their picture. She sort of joined their friendship. So I think there's
mm.
something there in that they'd already started developing a friendship, and then Maggie enters, and that's the imbalance is kind of off there. I don't know if I'm like grasping at straws here, but I did wonder if power dynamics was something that you were consciously exploring.
Yeah, no, you're not grasping at straws at all. Definitely. I mean, as soon as I knew that I wanted to write about this group of friends, long time friends, I knew that not only that I wanted there to be certain material differences between them, but that there almost needed to be.
Mhm.
And that it was quite realistic that there would be, actually. And the money side of things just felt like a way. I mean, as Maggie, I think it is, who points out to Will early on, it's not exactly, oh, poor us, we don't have a holiday home in the south of France. They're not exactly a good charitable case
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
they don't. But there is the sense that they are being taken care of and hosted and looked after. And as a result, the one thing they do every year is take the group out for this dinner at like a nice local restaurant, which Izzy, who comes in as the stranger and is able to look at things with fresh eyes, kind of figures out that it's quite a cheap meal, and again that's fine, but I think as soon as there is some sort of monetary difference between the couples, it just inevitably little jealousies creep in. Will particularly finds it very hard not to compare their living situation with Lydia and Roland's. And he and Roland have a pretty solid relationship by this point, sorry. But initially, he felt that Roland maybe, it was kind of convenient for him to go off and be with Lydia and get to live this life that he wouldn't have been able to live as an academic living in Edinburgh married to an artist. Because, as you said, Lydia comes from this very wealthy family. She's a bit of a sort of a nepo baby. Her dad was like very big in the art world, and she opened a gallery very young. So yeah, I'm sort of going off on a tangent, but it was definitely there from the start and
Yes.
something I was, yeah, kind of sort of actively keen to explore.
Yeah, I think it's something that really fascinates me, and I'm especially interested when money and class kind of come into it,
Yeah,
because I do think that kind of imbalance, like it will come up at some point. As much as you try and push it away, it's bound to come up, and there's bound to be some kind of misunderstanding somewhere, whether it be
exactly.
that you can't afford the meal that your friends want to go to, or I don't know, it can show up in any number of ways. But I
Yeah.
do think it's interesting the sort of issues it might bring up.
Yes, yeah, and also, there's one point where they get these cooks to come in and cook for them for Maggie's birthday, and Lydia's sort of saying, "Oh, it's so nice to be hosted in your own home," and Will's sort of thinking it's also kind of awkward,
Yeah.
in the same way that it's kind of awkward to be hosted by friends. Um, but one thing that wasn't intended and that kind of came about more naturally as I was writing was the mirroring in a way between the way that Roland and Lydia got together. So he was much older, he was a professor, she was a student. She wasn't underage or anything, but she was a student. There was a power imbalance there. And the friendship that kind of develops between Izzy, who's 19, and Sammy, who's 15.
Yeah.
And yeah, that became kind of a nice mirror as the writing went on.
I am gonna really
I think I vaguely dealt with that
you've done very
without
well, Chloe. I think we're doing great. I
yeah.
might be about to trip you up because I'm gonna
Okay.
ask about desire
Mm.
and how desire ended up being such a big component for this story.
Mm. That's such a good question.
Good luck trying
Um,
to tackle
yeah, I
that.
know. God, thanks. I mean, desire does come up in so many different
Mhm.
ways. Like I was saying earlier, that the stage of life that they're at, I think by this age, by 40, by your 30s, maybe people expect you to know exactly who you are and what you want. And that was one thing that I wanted to kind of unpick with this book. These characters, and they don't know everything.
No.
They're still making mistakes. They're still muddling through. Um, but the book, to a large degree, is kind of thinking about what they want and need and desire as individuals. Um, Whether that is in terms of career, or finances, financial motivations,
Mhm.
or whether that's thinking about more romantic
Yes.
love, lust. It's so hard to do this without
You're
to get
doing
onto the
very
love
well.
lust side of things.
I think you've done
I'm
very
just
well there.
answering in a very roundabout way. But it is, yeah, we could just say there's some love and lust in the book,
There
and
is.
it, yeah, and we can't talk too much more about that side of things.
So you'll just have to read it for yourselves, listeners.
Yeah.
Their friendship, it has, they've known each other for over 20 years, these two
Mhm.
couples. How do you feel that sort of length of time affects friendship?
I mean, on the one hand, I think they're at the place where, as with all old friendships, whether it's 20 years or 5 years, where they can just be in a room together and not talk, and everything is very easy in that sense. But to me, I don't want to repeat myself, but to me, it's definitely the differences that have grown within the space of those 20 years.
Mhm.
That's what's interesting. Um, and the question is whether these widening gaps between them are something that they can sit comfortably with and that can kind of just meld with their friendship, or whether they are too big for them to overcome and force them to start kind of drifting apart.
I think we've done wonderfully. So I will pull away from the book now, and I'm going to steal a
Mhm.
question from my friend Emma, who has done author interviews in the past, and she asks this brilliant question regarding a cultural family tree for your book. I'd love to know
Mm.
if you could pinpoint anything that might have influenced this novel, whether it be works of art, whether it be books, films, TV shows. Is there
Mhm.
anything that you think, oh, that might have had some kind of influence here, however big or small?
Yes, I love this
It's
question.
such a great question. I had to
Such a
steal
good
it.
question. It's brilliant. Yes, lots of influences. So, I mean, I mentioned Atonement earlier
Yes.
and Brian E. Tallis. Other novels in terms of those child disruptors that I was probably thinking about or had in the back of my mind include The Accidental by Ali Smith,
I
which
haven't read
actually
this.
Oh, it's my favorite of all her books. And my favorite character in the book is Astrid, this bright, lonely 13-year-old girl who, and she's sort of hysterical. She's like obsessed with language as well as her camera, her video camera. But at the start of the book, she has a favorite word, and by the end, there's another favorite word. And it would be so interesting to know what her favorite word is now. There's also in that Ali Smith book and lots of Ali Smith books, a mysterious stranger, someone who comes into the narrative and disrupts things. And I think that that is a brilliant device. And, Izzy is that device in this
Hmm.
book. I was thinking about films like A Bigger Splash. I don't know if
I
you've
haven't seen
seen
this,
that.
no.
Okay, that's also definitely one to add to your list. It's so good. Tilda Swinton and I was about to say Rafe Fiennes. Ralph Fiennes? Rafe
Yeah,
Fiennes,
I
right?
think,
Yeah,
yeah.
Rafe Fiennes. Okay, good. Go with my instinct. Dakota Johnson. I'm so bad with
Dakota Johnson, yeah.
yeah, okay. And someone else. Oh, sorry to the someone else. But anyway, a great film set in the summer. There's an interesting kind of father-daughter relationship going on, grown up, quite like sexy, again, rebellious daughter that he's been absent from for a while. And then in terms of art, it's interesting because my first two books were so heavily influenced by art. I mean,
Yes.
wet paint wouldn't exist were it not for the painting, Manet is about the Folie Bergère. With this book, I think because it was so, from the start, it was so much about the intricacies and entanglements between this group of friends. I didn't need to use art in the same way as a mirror or a foil as
Hmm.
I did for those books, but art definitely was an influence when it came to the setting and the mood. And I think lots of the themes that I explore in the book, especially, I mean, thinking about like the body and beauty, which is something that I think comes up quite naturally, particularly when, Lydia is comparing herself lying by the pool to her 19-year-old stepdaughter.
Yeah.
But those themes, those are things that I'm kind of always, or at least very often, thinking about when I'm writing about art in general.
Some great recommendations in there. I wondered what is next for you, Chloe.
Yeah, so I do have another idea for a novel that is percolating and that I'm quite excited about, but I'm not going to talk about it
No,
because it is
fair.
percolating. But I am, in the meantime, working on a non-fiction project, which I'm really enjoying. It's due out in 2028, so a little way away. But it's actually really interesting to think about in relation to the novels because it's sort of all about transitions in a life and particularly in a woman's life, but through the lens of this group of artists working in and around 19th century Paris.
Oh,
It's a mix
wow.
of group biography, art criticism, and flashes of memoir. So there's a real kind of mix of things going on, but it's basically about art and family and time.
This sounds brilliant. I mean, both
Thank
of those
you.
is very exciting. Um,
Thank
and
you.
obviously I can't wait for more words from you. I've read all of your novels now, and I will wait as long as it takes for the next one to come. But that nonfiction book sounds really exciting, and I'm looking forward to reading that. And hopefully we can have you on the podcast again in the future.
I would love it. I mean, you're going to get sick of me at some point,
Never, Chloe,
but I
never.
would love it.
Now, you have given us lots of recommendations, but I do normally finish
Mm,
on a recommendation. Is there anything you've
yeah.
been reading, watching, listening to recently that you want to recommend?
Yes. Well, a couple of things. I feel like in the heat wave, my recommendation is just go to museums because they have air on. And there are loads of great exhibitions to see. So that's kind of a practical tip. Um,
Have you seen the Tracey Emin
yes,
exhibition?
I
I
have.
really want to get to London to see it. I'm
Yeah, it's
desperate.
really worth going to see. It's not
Yes.
an easy show. It's a lot, but it is. I didn't love the entire thing, but I thought there were many flashes of complete brilliance. And she's incredible. So definitely go and see that. And then spend the day in the very cool Turbine Hall. Um, but another book that I read recently and thought was extraordinary is the debut novel of Rebecca Birrell. It's called Venus Vanishing. It's historical fiction, which I'm not normally one, doesn't normally kind of excite me in the same way, but I really loved it. It's about this young painter living in Berlin, kind of on the outbreak of war, and she just writes very, very well. It's like full of feeling and very richly detailed.
I love that. I'm always willing to give historical fiction a try, but I feel the same, that
Mm.
I don't get as excited by it. And then I'll come across books sometimes, like novels and the historical fiction, I'll go, oh my God, like I do like historical fiction.
Yes, I know, I know. I think dipping into it now and then. Maggie O'Farrell's latest, is that historical land?
Land, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes, because I mean she's an author who I will read anything she writes,
Yes,
and so
agreed.
I'm very excited to read that one. But
I am as well. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts that she's given, so I'm excited
um,
for that one. But I only actually read Hamnet at the end of last year, the start of this year. It was basically I watched it, I read it before I watched the film,
I
and I
did
was
the
just
same.
blown away.
Yeah, identical. I also only read it because I wanted to read it before I watched the film,
Yeah.
and I thought it was so good, so moving. And that scene, which didn't make it into the film for obvious reasons, I
The
guess.
perspective of a flea.
Yes, genius.
Genius. I
Showing
say
how the
this to
plate
everybody.
traveled.
Yes.
I thought that was I mean, I would have loved to have somehow seen that in the film,
Me
like whether
too.
it was via animation or something. I feel like that could have worked,
It
maybe.
could
I
have
don't
done,
know.
yeah.
It was so good,
It
so
would have
clever.
felt maybe a bit too much like, is it Yorgos Lanth? I'm gonna get his name wrong. The
Um,
one that the director of like Poor Things. It would have felt very
oh
much like that if it had
yes, yeah.
zoned into that. Or like oh God, I can't think of somebody, but I don't know if it would have, gone in a completely different direction to
Yeah,
like Chloe Zhao's vision. Like,
it would have been, it could have gone one of two ways. So
yeah.
maybe it's better that they didn't take the risk.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. Oh, Chloe, I've absolutely loved chatting to you today, and I absolutely loved your new novel. For the listeners, Family Friends is out now, and as I said earlier, I'll be popping a link in the show notes to grab yourselves a copy, and I will also be popping a link in the show notes to all of the amazing books, films, TV shows we've spoken about today, and also to Chloe's previous novels, Wet Paint and Second Self, which are also both brilliant. But lastly, Chloe, thank you so much for coming back on A Pair of Bookends.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really, really fun. Thank you.
Thank you. And listeners, you can give Chloe a follow via Instagram, I believe.
Yeah.
Links to that in the show notes. And if you want more content from us, you can find us over on Patreon. You can also follow us on Instagram at A Pair of Bookends Pod and at A Pair of Bookends on TikTok. That is all we've got time for. Thank you so much again, Chloe, and thank you, listeners, for listening. Bye.
Bye.